What up guys, Sinapse here. Today I'm going to talk about gaming during Halloween, and then I'm going to go into a few questions that I've asked all of you guys to ask me, whether it's in the comments or through a private message. Alright, so stay tuned later for those, but first, Halloween. Alright, Halloween is always a huge event in Tokyo and in Japan in general, and probably even bigger than anywhere else in the world I've been. Especially these past couple of years. It seems to get bigger every single year. Places like Shibuya are absolute, rammed with people, absolute madness, right? It can be a really great place to meet a lot of girls, but there are some downsides as well. I'm just going to break all of that down for you guys today. So the first thing that you'll notice as you're approaching during Halloween is that it's really easy to open people, especially again if you're somewhere like Shibuya or Roppongi or something. Everybody's out, everybody's super social, and essentially the whole place is like one warm club, basically. Everybody's kind of mingling, you can talk to pretty much anybody you want to, and you don't really need any sort of conversation. You know, there's all the obvious conversation piece of their costume and your costume, right? And everybody's pretty much out there taking pictures. So really easy way to open girls on Halloween is to simply take pictures with them, and then that way you can share pictures later. It's an easy way to get their line very cut and dry. Now the downsides, the flip side of this is, since everybody's out having fun, it can be a little bit harder to take people into isolation, to take girls away from that fun, right, to your house or something. So pulling girls, if you have a spot that's right by the main street, it's possible to pull them for a quick drink, hook up with them, and then, release them back into the ocean, as it were. Or if you'll have to wait till the end of the night to do that, or whenever they're about to go home, whether that's just about before last train-ish, as they've had enough time to entertain themselves. Kind of similar to a club where it can be difficult to pull girls in the first couple hours of the club, but as the night gets longer, people have had their fill of their entertainment for the night. They're more willing to leave the venue with a guy. So the same thing with Halloween. You can think of it in a lot of ways like a club. Right when people arrive, they've taken the time to put together their costume. They're not going to immediately want to go to some guy's house, right? But perhaps you can frame it as getting a quick drink, and then that's okay. Or alternatively, pull them at the end of the night. However, for the most part, Halloween is more of a time to just collect a huge amount of phone numbers or lines or whatever, and follow up with all of those girls later. Usually on Halloween, it's really easy to get dozens and dozens of lines, and to the point where you start forgetting who everybody is, which is also why the picture thing is so powerful, because you can look back at your line chat with the girl and be like, oh, that was her, right? Because you have a picture of you and her together, so you can really piece together who those dozens and dozens of girls actually are. All right. So in terms of where you should go, again, Shibuya, Roppongi, those are really big areas. Do wear a costume. I'll get into a little bit sort of what kind of costumes are good and what's are maybe not so good for picking up chicks. Good is anything typically masculine, so like cavemen, policemen, sort of those are sort of obvious ones, but anything that will put you in an already masculine frame is going to be good. It's a chance to wear a costume, which is sort of like adopting a frame anyway, so you might as well adopt a masculine one. Don't be, I don't know, Jigglypuff or something, unless you already are quite masculine yourself, right? If you have a very strong frame and you're masculine and really like charai, right? It can actually work in your advantage to be something cute and unsuspecting, right? Because they're like, oh, it's cute, and then you can have that gap, right? That gap between how cute the costume is and how charai and intense you are as a guy, right? You're pulling her right away and she's like, oh, it's cute, but oh my god, like sex, right? So yeah, so that can work, but for the most part, the safe choices are more sort of masculine types, right? I would stay away from anything which totally covers your face, and any sort of full coverage masks, or anything that is painting your face, because nobody wants to kiss you if you have your face painted. Just don't paint your face. Yeah, a little bit is fine, maybe like a little bit of blood or something if that's what you want to do, but full face paint, I would stay away from it. Yeah, and same with the mask. If they can't see you, it's going to be hard to actually game them, right? So especially your eyes, and you want to have some visibility so that you can still have facial expressions and be social. So no matter how cool you think your costume is, if it's all over you, you're not going to actually get to meet anybody. They'll just be like, who are you again? Oh, you were that costume, right? All right, so that is pretty much it for Halloween. The last thing I want to mention is that pretty much everywhere, whether it's love hotels, clubs, or even karaoke and all that, is going to be absolutely packed. So your best bet is probably just to take a taxi home, rather with the girl, rather than trying to stumble around the love hotel areas, especially late at night. You're definitely going to want to take advantage of your own logistics because they may not exist in the city. Now, if you get there really early, like in the afternoon, you can probably still find a love hotel or something like that. Clubs as well get really, really packed. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind, that there's going to be lines, and at a certain point it might get so full they might turn people away. So plan your night accordingly with all those things in consideration. All right, that's it for Halloween. Let's jump into the mailbag. So first question I got is, how do I balance a busy life with building up approaching skill? How do I not use being busy or tired as an excuse, right? And how do you deal with resistance at the very beginning? It's a common question. People are busy. People have a lot of time, or not a lot of time in their life. They've got a lot of social life plus work plus hobbies and all that. Ultimately, it is something that you're going to have to prioritize in your mind, right? You're going to have to realize that you are going to have to make time for that. Most of the time, if you say you don't have time for that, or you're too busy, it means you're too busy for that, right? So it's not that you don't actually have time. I'm sure you could look at your day and be like, well, I spend this amount of time watching Netflix, or this amount of time on YouTube or on Facebook or whatever. Everybody has at least half an hour to an hour every day where they're not really doing anything with their time. That's one place you're going to have to make some sacrifices. And for the most part, if you're doing any consumptive behavior, like consuming things, especially like visually, whether that's video games or movies or anything like that, that's probably the first place to look for sort of more time, right? You can kind of cut that down, or at least minimize it, if this is a big priority for you. And ultimately, I do think when people think they don't have time for it, they just mean that they haven't decided to make it a priority yet, right? And they actually do have time, they just decided not to find that time. So everybody has time, you can find it, you can make it if it's a priority to you. So it's important to just think about where that time can come from, and if it's a priority, and if it is, then you will find a way to make time for it. On the other hand, it's sort of an easier tip is to build time into your day, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes here and there, where you can be like a sort of a buffer zone. So let's say, and I'm pretty bad at being very last minute for a lot of things, right? Like if I have a meeting, or if I have work or something, or a meeting, I'll arrive like with 1 minute to spare or something, right? But if you can get in the habit of building about 10 or 15 minutes extra to go to whatever it is you're going to, whether that's work or a business meeting, or just dinner with a friend, if you can aim to arrive 15 minutes early, then that will give you the time that you need along the way to just run a quick interaction or two or three, in the train station. You pass that girl, because it's always, I notice for me, it's always when I'm in a huge rush and I see that perfect girl and I'm like, I really want to be able to talk to her. So if you just get in the habit of building a little buffer of maybe 10 or 15 minutes everywhere you go, so that you do have that time when you see that girl on your commute or whatever to turn around and engage her briefly. And a lot of times those kind of quick interactions that are super sincere, you're like, look, I really got to go, but we're gonna hang out next time. A lot of times those interactions can be really effective because it was so spontaneous and because it was so authentic, right? And she senses that this guy's actually on his mission, he's actually doing something, but he cared enough to stop and talk to me. So that is one thing that you can also implement in your day. Another question I have from Kuroakami is, could you give me some examples of personal experiences about how to drive the conversation from simple hobbies talk to get to the core of the girl? How do you cut deeper when on a date with a girl? It's a really good question, very important topic, very important subject, because ultimately you do want to be able to transition from sort of a foreigner or somebody who is literally like through the literary meaning of the word, an outsider, a gaijin, a foreigner, somebody who's distant from her, and how do you flip that around to actually relating to the girl in front of you on an intimate and personal level. Super important for actually your success with women in the in Japan, especially when people are a little bit more distant to people of other cultures, a very homogenous society and all of that. So cutting deeper, how do we do it, especially on dates or later into the interaction if it's a first interaction as well. Essentially, one way you can think of cutting deeper is, we're all individuals. We have skin that separates ourselves from the outside of the world, and inside of us we have this sort of deep-seated fear that maybe we're we're different from everybody else, right? So a lot of what connection is, a lot of what being social is wanting to feel like you're understood, wanting to feel like you share the same kind of subjective experience as somebody else, right? So when I was a kid, I had times where I would wonder, I was like, well, what if I'm the only real human, right? What if everybody else is an alien? Or what if everybody's a robot? What if this is all a simulation, right? And I think this kind of fear gets to a really core part of what socialization is all about, or socializing, connecting with people, and really falling in love is all about. It's not just seeing somebody that you think is beautiful, but it's also kind of deeply feeling as if this person over here feels to a certain degree the same kind of subjective experience as I do, right? They're not so different from me, they laugh when things are funny and cry when things are sad and all of that sort of stuff. So really what cutting deeper is about is trying to get to the core of who that person is, and trying to show them that yes, we may look different, we may be from different cultures, but we do experience the same kind of subjective reality at the end of the day. All right. Now, you don't have a lot of advantages that the shared culture will give you. If you're from the same country, you have a lot of cultural background that's automatically easy to connect over. Remember this TV show, or remember this food that we used to eat, or any of that kind of stuff. It's really easy to connect with people from your same culture. Japan being quite different, there's not really a lot to instantly connect over except something like anime or something, but that's about it, right? So one of the exercises which I would suggest people do is they don't take things to be mystical. Don't take women to be magical, mystical creatures who act in sort of unpredictable ways. You hear this a lot from guys. You're like, women just do crazy behaviors and it doesn't make sense. Why doesn't she just tell me what she means or something? And while I can understand, it's certainly frustrating if, a woman's reaction comes out of nowhere seemingly, right? But one thing you can get in the habit of doing is always digging down and thinking about why people, especially women, behave in a certain way, and imagine every action that they have to be perfectly logical within, what they think is the best plan of action for themselves. Okay, so even if something seems crazy, seems wild, seems contradictory, it's probably serving a purpose or a role in her life, right? So if you can get into the habit of asking why, like digging down why, following the trail of why until you get all the way down to what really every single behavior of hers is serving, how it's serving her, right? How it's preserving her life, her self-image, her esteem, her confidence, all those kinds of things, right? Because pretty much every action will have a cause, a root cause, a reason why she's doing something. And that will shed light on what her values are, right? So much of cutting deeper is about digging into the value set of that person in front of you, and you can think of values as pretty much anything from, like, I love visual K, right, to I hate visual K, or, Mormonism is amazing, right, I believe in God, right, there is no God. Those are pretty extreme ones, but there are also more sort of simple ones, or ones that kind of transcend culture a little bit better. Things such as, like, what is a woman's role in a family? Is she supposed to go work, or is she supposed to only raise children and stay at home? Or what is her role, right? Where does she see herself in a family unit? Where does she see herself, among her friends? How is she viewed among her friends? Is she seen as, the smart one, the funny one? The leader, is she a follower? Is there a decided leader in her friend circle? And if so, why are they the leader? Did it just naturally happen? what are her ex-boyfriends like? You know, that's a big indicator of her own personality, right? If she's like, oh man, I hate these assholes, why do I always date assholes? Well, why are you attracted to assholes, right? So all of these kinds of questions relate a lot to what her values are specifically, right? Ultimately, you can think of cutting deeper as one of the 3 modes of interaction, right? So most common mode that people are familiar with is the information exchange mode of interaction, okay? This basically is something where you're passing pieces of information back and forth like a computer. You know, you say, oh, I'm going to wear red shoes today, or how old are you? I'm 37, right? Whatever it is, those are legitimate pieces of information that are being passed back and forth. So when you ask somebody a question like, how old are you, or what's your job, you want to know the actual data, right, that is true about them, right? So you receive some data, you're like, oh, that's interesting, okay? So that's basically the information exchange level of conversation. Moving up into a sort of a higher, more airy, less logical state, you have what I call vibing, right? Which is essentially energetic-based communication. So something can be nonsensical, can be fun, can be light, just playing around, you know. If you think of literally play, when kids play, it doesn't serve any particular purpose, it's just fun, right? You do it because it pumps your energy up, it gets you excited, there's no end goal in specific, right? So vibing is something which is very important in initial bit of a conversation to relax everybody and to make everybody, you know, have fun and enjoy themselves, right? And you can think of this as anything from telling jokes, making nonsensical statements, calling people giraffes or squirrels or small human beings, whatever kind of amuses you and carries over to them. That's vibing, and that's passing back and forth energy. There's no particular meaningful content necessarily being communicated, or if there is, you know, it's not the main focus. The focus is on being funny, being light, and passing energy back and forth, right? So that's sort of a lighter, airier form of communication above information exchange. So then what happens if you go deep? Cutting deep then would be below that, and it's much more real, as it were. It deals with the real problems of the world, right? Our real human experience, right? And it attempts to communicate meaning in a way that goes beyond just the facts. So how old are you? What's your business? Or whatever. It goes deeper than that, right? So it's basically, again, this understanding of a mutual understanding of a shared experience, right? So cutting deeper is getting really into the values of who they are. Now, if you think of something like information, you receive a piece of information, you can dig past that and it will often be like a signpost that leads to the values, okay? So, you know, if you receive a simple statement like, oh, I'm a nihilist, right? If they're a nihilist, if that's their job, that's information. But you can dig past that and get into something a little bit more interesting when you start dealing with the values. So you can be like, well, why did you become a nihilist? What does being a nihilist do for you? You know, obviously they're passionate about you know, fashion and appearance. Obviously that means a lot to them, and they find it valuable when women look good, right? Which, again, you can keep digging further and further into that, and it will display a lot of really interesting things about that person. You know, if you ask a question like, oh, do you have a boyfriend, or do you know, when was the last time you broke up with your boyfriend? You know, they might say, oh, 6 months ago, or no, I don't have a boyfriend. And you can dig into that further. You know, you can dig into it to be like, well, you know, does she seem like her self-esteem depends on the fact of that she has a boyfriend or not? Is she one of those kinds of girls who wants to have a boyfriend in order to feel like a proper woman, right? Or is she fine being on her own? And how does she feel about that, right? All of these things is essentially what you can do is take that information that you're getting and then dig down deeper into what it means about her, what it implies about her, or you can just ask them about those values in addition to that, okay? So, another question from Thomas. How would you tackle improving charisma? If you don't include a change of mentality and generally surrounding yourself with charismatic people as a factor? Okay. How would you go about improving charisma? Well, one of the things I think that's really important is to focus a lot on the other person, and that goes back to empathy. That goes back to reading facial expressions, making sure you're able to accurately sort of read how a person is feeling, what they're thinking about, and how they think about your reactions, right? Dealing with things diplomatically is important too. You know, like if it's a girl that you're trying to hook up with, and she's like, you know, I work for Amway. Are you going to be like, Amway's a pyramid scheme or something, right? Probably not. Even if you think that, it may not be the most tactful thing to bring up. So keep in mind that what you say doesn't have to be about the truth so much as it has to be about preserving the moi in a certain sense of the word, right? So it's not always best to say the absolute most factual thing. In some cases, it can be kind of grating. Now, it doesn't mean you should shy away from controversy or shy away from disagreeing. You definitely shouldn't feel any need to not disagree with girls ever. It's good to definitely have your own principles and standards and things like that. But keep in mind that the way that you react to people, you know, are you going against them for a specific reason? Does it suit your needs and suit your outcome, suit your goals in the interaction or not? Somewhat related to that is making sure that you're able to communicate in a way which is perceived correctly within the social context. So the way that you interact, you know, among your American friends might be quite different from the way you interact among Japanese friends. Something as simple as how far away you stand, you know, what kind of humor, jokes you make, you know, are you very sarcastic? Because chances are that's not going to go over very well in Japan. So realizing what the cultural situation is and how people communicate. One way you can learn a lot of that is just by watching TV. You know, I mean, like I don't particularly like TV, but it is a great way to get sort of the speech patterns down, understand how people interact with each other. You know, realize that things like tsukomi and boke are more popular styles of humor than something like sarcasm, very dry stuff, right? So I hope that goes into a little bit of the charisma question. Alright, another question from Maximus. He says, brilliant stuff. Would love you to do a video on how men over 40 can day game and date girls aged 18 to 21 without coming across as creepy, making things awkward, etc. So the first thing I guess I would say is that you don't need to make it into a big deal, the fact that you're older than them. A lot of girls are going to be very much interested, especially interested in guys who are older than them, you know, 40 plus, even if they're 18 to 21. There's not really any sort of stigma or creepiness that automatically comes to mind, you know, in Japan associated with that. Keep in mind, this is a culture with a well-established practice of things like enjo kosai or compensated dating younger girls for, you know, even just walking around with them, buying them things. That sort of culture is very, very prevalent. So you're not going to need to worry about the fact that you are significantly older than them. And in many cases, I think it can be a huge advantage, right? I think a lot of guys' sort of prime in Japan is basically around that age when they're, you know, 30, 40 or so. They have a little bit of stability. You know, it's very, very easy for them to fill that sort of dad frame role, and you know, really take these girls around, and they'll happily fall in the wake and of your gravitas, as it were. So if you're in your 40s and beyond, as I said, I think it can be a huge advantage. One thing you want to stay away from is being overly comical, overly silly, right? If you're, you know, established man, you should have your dad frame down tight. In other words, you know, you don't need to look to these young girls for validation of any kind. Not that, you know, most people do, but because you're kind of established in life, it's very easy for you to have a set agenda, a set way of thinking, and that can really pull people in, which is a good thing, right? You have these set beliefs about the world, which can be a little bit difficult if you're trying to change those beliefs, but at least when you're with another, you know, a young woman who usually more often than not is quite, you know, impressionable and looking for something, they're basically like floating in the ocean of the world, maybe looking for something to latch onto, looking for some stability, and not just financially, although that is a thing as well, but in addition, like beliefs, essentially, stability, certainty about the world. So that can be a huge advantage for you.
In terms of just the general approach, I don't think there's anything you need to do specifically different than younger guys need to do. You know, perhaps maybe don't do the karaoke bangs and standing outside of a Family Mart with a Chuhai with the girl. You know, you can take them to a proper venue, but at the same time, that's not to say you need to take them on multiple wine and dine type dates before you feel the need to pull the trigger. You definitely can and should go for it after the first date. But, you know, you're gonna want to go to an actual venue, you know, and have a nice conversation and experience for, you know, an hour and a half or so before you pull them back. In terms of the actual approach, definitely just go where the girls that you like are, and talk to them in a relatively calm and normal manner. Invite them out, and everything else will work. Again, I don't think it's like a really big issue. I don't think it's like massively different for guys who are over 40 compared to guys who are more like my age. My age, you can get away with stuff like, you know, just going to a convenience store and standing on the street with a beer and with the girl, right? It's not that helps you in any particular way. So yeah, so don't get discouraged. Don't worry about it too much. Basically, just go out and game them, and everything will work out fine. You know, I think there's more advantages than disadvantages to being in your 40s and gaming young girls in Japan. All right, I hope that answers you guys' questions. If you have more questions, leave them in the comments. I will do another kind of Q&A mailbox video in the future, so definitely drop those questions below if you have any more. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a beautiful, wonderful weekend. Halloween is going to be amazing. See you guys next time.